Let us pray. Our Father, we confidently ask for your strength and encouragement in our service of you through our service of others. We humbly ask for your gift of wisdom to guide us in making good laws and good decisions for the present and the future of Alberta. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions.
I move that the petitions for private bills presented before the Assembly on April 13, 1988 be now read and received.
Having heard the motion by the honourable member from Drumheller, does the Assembly agree? Opposed? Motion carried.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Minister of the Environment, followed by Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Swan Hills is one of those pretty little towns that exists to the north and the west of Edmonton, and it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and all members of the Legislative Assembly 54 grade 6 students from Swan Hills who are accompanied by 2 teachers, Ian Hallworth and Joyce Venables, and 6 parents who are acting in the role of supervisors today: Terry Everett, Marlene Hines, Corrine Lang, Renee Wakeland, Gladys Eckroth, and Lynn Wilson. I'd also like to point out that when the Premier found out that we were having some special guests from Swan Hills today, that he wanted me to make a special statement of hello to them. He was there in Swan Hills on September 11, 1988. 87, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that our young guests and their parents and teachers rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and members of the Assembly some 26 students from St. Basil's School from the constituency of Edmonton-Norwood. Mr. Speaker, I'm told, and I know that 2 of the members here are pages in the Assembly at this present time, and also I'm told that 3 of the students are among the top math students in the city. Mr. Speaker, they are accompanied by their teacher and one of our former colleagues from this Assembly, Walter Swender. Now, I know that Walter has looked forward for many months for this introduction from me, Mr. Speaker, but I would say that they're in the public gallery. I would ask them to stand and receive the warm welcome from this Assembly.
Edmonton Gold Bar, followed by the Minister of Culture, followed by Redwater Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, I'm particularly honored today to introduce to you and to the Assembly a group of 27 grade 12 students. Mr. Speaker, they're very special students. They're here with Interculture Canada. And Interculture Canada, Mr. Speaker, is an organization providing worldwide cultural exchange. Now over 70 countries are members. This organization promotes world peace and international development through cultural exchanges. The nature of the program, Mr. Speaker, allows families in Alberta to host a student from another country through their grade 12 year to live in their home and go to school in our province. Mr. Speaker, they represent the following countries: Sweden, Brazil, Belgium, Argentina, South Australia, Austria, Hong Kong, Indonesia, France, Paraguay, Iceland, Spain, Netherlands, Venezuela, Denmark, Honduras, Chile, Switzerland, Thailand, and Norway. Mr. Speaker, they are accompanied by 2 members representing host families from Alberta, Mrs. Helen Wood and Mrs. Edwina Medill. They're seated in the public gallery, and I would ask them to rise so that members can show them how really glad we are that they're here in Alberta and Canada.
Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism.
Mr. Speaker, I have two welcomes to bring to your attention today. First, it is a special privilege for me, and on behalf of my colleague, the member for McLeod, the Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife, to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly, Mr. Hugh Craig, Chairman of the Alberta Historical Resources Foundation. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Craig has just received the first Heritage Tourism Award presented at the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta annual meeting in Banff on April 9th. He is also a member of the Remington Alberta Museum Advisory Committee and serves as well on the Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump Advisory Board. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask Mr. Craig to rise and to receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly 6th grade 10 students from the Chinook Winds Adventist Academy in Springbank. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind members of the Assembly that when some of these students were in grade 7, they and their teachers and other students were able to escape a destructive fire which in fact destroyed their school right on the outskirts of Calgary. And for about a year, they found accommodation elsewhere in Calgary. They are seated in the members' gallery. They're accompanied by their teacher, Mr. Lorne Agray, and I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Redwater Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and to the rest of this Assembly Mr. Ron Pollard from the community of Thorhill. And he's the chairman of the Economic Development Committee there and is visiting the legislature to gather some information on a project for the community. He is seated in the members' gallery, and I'd ask him to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in a document that was passed out in the House, a Statement of Social Policy for Alberta, after the House, the Deputy Premier elaborated on the rhetoric, and basically I saw it was rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. The report itself didn't say much, but the Deputy Premier did seem to fill in the blanks for us outside the House. Mr. Speaker, he elaborated on what the government means when it wants to build on strong traditions of volunteerism, and he gave as an example, Mr. Speaker, food banks. My question to the Premier, is it now government policy that such basic services as feeding the poor should be turned over to charity?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, then my question to the Premier then, was the Deputy Premier then just speaking for himself, and that the Premier now contradicts what the Deputy Premier says and he rejects what the Deputy Premier said then yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, the Deputy Premier didn't say that government policy to turn the feeding of people over to charity.
Speaker, that's absolute nonsense. If he was watching, he would know that he said it. My question back to this Premier, is the Premier saying, I want to ask him this question then, would he agree that the reason that we have food banks in this city is the fact that of government policy that has allowed high unemployment and cutbacks in social services? That's why we have food banks, Mr. Speaker. Would the Premier acknowledge that?
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. There are food banks all over Canada, the United States, for that matter, the world. In society, Mr. Speaker, there are always problems with some people who need more help than others, and our society reacts in a variety of ways to help them.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's people helping people, neighbors again, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Premier, so we can be absolutely sure, because this doesn't mean anything. It's all right-wing rhetoric. Is the Premier saying then that he finds it acceptable to have food banks in this province and that they will always be here, and that this program is to shift away so that the charitable sector will take up these sorts of stands and they will not be part of government policy? What is it? We want to know, Mr. Premier.
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, I think every member of this legislature would prefer that there not be food banks. But as I said, in our society, Mr. Speaker, we react in a variety of ways to help people who require help. The honourable member may say what he wants about this document, but I think it is a remarkable document that's unmatched anywhere in Canada. It is presented by a caring government, and it is reflecting the views of the people of Alberta who believe in the institutions of the family, believe in individual initiative, and yet believe in caring for those who need care.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, yes, we are neighbourly, whether it comes to offering airplane rides or food hampers. Mr. Speaker, does this then issue, this paper, a warning that social allowance rates are going to be left at their current inadequate levels?
I'm not certain, Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member means that the rates that have been announced as being increased by 13.5% at that level, because obviously they're being increased by 13.5%.
Member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Premier. In the document, self-reliance is quoted in a significant way. Could the Premier indicate what the plans are from this point on in terms of looking at current government programs and refocusing some of their objectives in terms of self-reliance? Will that happen soon, or will that be into the fall session?
Well, Mr. Speaker, self-reliance, individual initiative, strength of the family, love for our homes and our communities and our province, caring for people are all in this document. And the government, first of all, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Deputy Premier mentioned yesterday, that a resolution now exists on the order paper of the government motions to deal in a debate on this matter in the House and to hear all members' views. But secondly, the government will match any new programs that are suggested against this policy paper, and the government also measure existing programs against this policy paper. And those that require changes will be made.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier today. Weekly newspapers in rural Alberta have a very sad tale to tell, Mr. Speaker, about the alarming number of farm families forced to abandon their futures in agriculture. Now, the Conservative policy statement released in the House yesterday refers to statistics that indicate our rural population will decline to less than 14% of the total by the year 2001. And I'm wondering if the Premier can tell us if this prediction of rural depopulation is a policy objective of the government or is an estimate of an inevitable trend.
Mr. Speaker, there has been in some time all over North America a move from rural Alberta into urban centres. This government has worked very hard to continue to maintain the strength of rural Alberta and our family farms and our agriculture communities. We do more than any other province in Canada, and we'll continue to do that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, supplementary, there's been an average of 15 families forced off the farm every week since this fall when the Premier said we'll do everything possible to strengthen the family farm and keep people on the farm. And I'm wondering what specific programs the Premier is prepared to announce in this Assembly that deal specifically with the debt crisis in agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Agriculture or the Associate Minister of Agriculture may well wish to speak on this as well. But I think, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the government has provided a great deal of assistance in helping our farmers with their debt problems. Some $2 billion, Mr. Speaker, provided to the farmers and ranchers of Alberta, fixed rate, 20-year money at 9%. That's not matched anywhere in North America. Also, Mr. Speaker, while that 9% is fixed for 20 years, it could be lower should interest rates we be allowed to reduce interest rates. That kind of funding, and I must say that the farmers and ranchers of Alberta have taken up those funds, and some 80% of the money that has been taken up has been used to reduce existing debt dramatically. It's providing some savings of $40 million to farmers and ranchers of Alberta. This program, along with protection for energy costs, protection for fertilizer costs, assistance with insurance and stabilization, provides Alberta's farmers and ranchers with the best opportunity anywhere in Canada to grow and thrive in the agricultural sector.
The proof is in the pudding, Mr. Speaker. The statistics speak for themselves. I will direct the next question to the Minister of Agriculture, though. In the report issued by the Department on the ADC, they estimate that a further 2,400 quarter sections of land in rural Alberta will be restructured. And I'm wondering if the Minister has done any studies to determine what effects losing that many farm families from rural Alberta will have on our schools, on our businesses, and on our communities in general.
Mr. Speaker, the figures do speak for themselves, and it's only sad that the opposition would not look at the figures, whereby the figures indicate that in the year 1987, because of the strong support of this government, for the first time since 1980, farm bankruptcies have actually decreased rather than increased. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, our farming population has decreased at a smaller rate than any other province in Canada. Again, that is attributed directly to the strong support that the Premier indicated in his comments to the Honourable Member for Vegreville.
Well, I'm sure that'll make the farm families going broke all over Alberta sleep better tonight, Mr. Speaker. And I'm wondering which of the following ideas that I've brought forward in this Assembly the Minister is actively considering to deal with the debt crisis. 6% interest rates on farm loans, debt set aside, debt mediation with teeth, the Alberta Farmland Trust. Are you looking at any of those programs?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have analyzed some of them. Some of them I recognize are programs that he has adopted from the province of Manitoba, and when the analysts did look at them very closely, they found that they had more of a detrimental impact on farming in Manitoba, so we naturally are not going to accept them here. But we are analyzing a number of measures that we feel will contribute in a very positive way, as the Premier has indicated, on an ongoing basis, and they will be announced when the time is appropriate.
Main question or supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon? Supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, it's also to the Premier. And would he not consider now actually putting a debt adjustment board in with some teeth in view of that huge hemorrhage of movement of people off the farms, particularly also with the Mulroney trade agreement, opening it up for large American corporate farms to come in and push the small farmers off the land here?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, both the arguments the honourable member made for doing such a thing are absolutely false. There isn't a large hemorrhage. As a matter of fact, the honourable member must be staying in the city too much. If he traveled through rural Alberta with me, he would know that Alberta's farmers and ranchers are very, very confident and building for the future. Our meat sector in agriculture is very strong. Government programs have assisted dramatically in stabilizing the grain sector. Alberta's farmers and ranchers are tough, able to compete. They're looking forward to the free trade agreement. It opens new horizons for them, Mr. Speaker. They've never been protected in the past. They're prepared to compete with anybody. And they're going to be able to compete into the biggest market in the world, and it's going to allow an entire new opportunity for growth in our rural Alberta, and they aren't going about looking negatively at things like that, like the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party is.
Cypress Radcliffe, supplementary.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture. I wonder if the Minister can inform the Assembly on what percentage, either directly or indirectly, of farm debt that the government is now carrying.
Mr. Speaker, I believe it's somewhere in the 50% area when one takes into account those farmers that have participated under the Farm Credit Stability Program, which total in the vicinity of some 15,000. In addition, we've got in excess of $1 billion loaned out by way of direct loans through ADC and some loan guarantees but I will confirm those figures and get back to the honourable member.
Main question, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, question is to the Minister of Environment and possibly Municipal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, one of the major problems facing farmers and residents west of Highway 2 between Calgary and Edmonton is the huge number of blossoming sulfur and gas plants under the government's policy of if you put a number of plants out, each doing a little bit, you may be able to get away with it more pollution in the long run. The second sentence, Mr. Speaker, is added to this problem is a recent court case, the Canadian Oxy plant in Mazeppa, just south of Calgary, where the municipality, who had arranged tougher environmental laws, Mr. Speaker, on the startup of a plant, had those laws thrown out as being ultra-vires. My question to the Minister of Environment is, what is this government's policy as far as helping out councils or putting through in such a way that our municipal councils will have some authority on the pollution laws before a plant can go in?
Well, Mr. Speaker, at the outset, it is certainly not the intent of the government, and the government certainly has no agenda to basically say that there should be literally hundreds and hundreds of small sour gas plants around the province of Alberta to, in fact, hide the case of sulfur emissions or pollution in our province. That simply isn't so. That's just nonsensical, and I don't know why the member from Westlock Sturgeon would even raise it in that light. The policies that we have in our province currently say that for any sour gas plant that has sulfur emissions above 10 tons per day level and limit, then in essence they will have to have pollution control equipment and there will have to be sulfur recovery. I've indicated publicly in the past that that is a matter that we currently have reviewed to see whether or not that level of 10 ton per day should be lowered and reduced. And we're having discussions ongoing right now with agencies such as the Energy Resources Conservation Board and others, and perhaps at some time through 1988 we'll be in a position to add some further detail to that. With respect to assistance to municipalities in this regard, of course all municipal governments in our province basically have to issue development permits to any developer who would come along. And at that point in time, the municipal government can ask the developer or the proponent of a sour gas plant to identify what, in fact, will be part of the plant that they will have in question.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Now that we have a new environment policy that the Minister has talked about, and the government is the government prepared to review the Planning Act, this could be to the municipalities, and the industrial development strategy to see whether or not gas and sulfur plants can be removed from agricultural areas or close to prime agricultural land?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the Minister of Municipal Affairs would like to supplement this because this question had also to deal with the Planning Act. There's no doubt at all that in recent years in the province of Alberta, there's been increased interest by the citizens of our province that when a proponent comes forward with a sour gas plant, that citizens in the area have tended to now assemble and to say basically we are not interested in having the sour gas plant in our area. It's a situation that I've referred to by way of the word NIMBY, N-I-M-B-Y, meaning not in my backyard. And the same kind of concept applies for garbage dumps and or the like. And that seems to be an ongoing thing. My understanding is that we currently have approximately 35 small sour gas plants that are located close or proximate to urban settlements throughout the province of Alberta. And I understand that over the next decade there may very well be a system whereby there would be upwards of 2 per year on average added over the next 10 years, at least planned for over the next decade.
Perhaps supplementary to the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Speaker, the Minister says hundreds and hundreds, is dozens and dozens of plants that he's permitting to. Mr. Speaker, the Minister's policies of moving gas plants away from residential areas is well known. However, the Minister is still allowing gas plants to go into prime agricultural land. This is what I want to know. Will he not take a step further and forbid plants to be built in prime agricultural land?
Well, Mr. Speaker, That's an interesting question. Basically, most of these plants take up land holdings of approximately 4 to 5 to 6 acres in area. That is the approximate size of a rural acreage subdivision. Would the member from West Loch Sturgeon also be arguing then that there should no longer be permitted in the province of Alberta any rural acreage development of 4 to 6 acres in size, or it's simply a question of saying that you shouldn't have any industrial development by way of sour gas plants? Whatever the answer is, I think that all of us recognize that in terms of the concern that this government has shown with respect to the protection of agricultural land, I'd like to point out that it was not too long ago that we asked the Environment Council of Alberta to undertake a major series of public hearings throughout the whole province of Alberta looking at the whole question of utilization of prime agricultural land, and I think it's a matter that all of us are concerned about, that if number one soil is taken out, whether or not it be for rural subdivision or industrial development, that's a negative.
Thank you. Final supplementary, West Loch Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for saving the House. The last supplementary then to the minister is that he mentions 4 or 5 acres. Minister surely well knows in the sulphur plant the danger area could go out over quite a number of acres. We're talking about neutralizing maybe a quarter section. Will he not take it upon himself and this government to at least approach some other members of the government to say that prime agricultural land is much too valuable, be turned over to sulphur plants and gasoline plants?
Mr. Speaker, I'm always moved by the emotion of the member from West Loch Sturgeon, particularly when he shakes his hand at me. I would like to repeat what I said in the third question that he raised. He asked me, will I undertake it? I thought I had responded in the third question that he had raised that we had already undertaken it. And we'd asked not too long ago the Environment Council of Alberta to undertake a massive public hearing throughout the whole province of Alberta with this whole question of future use of prime agricultural land. I should also point out, for the benefit of the member from West Loch Sturgeon, that that report has now been published. And if the member has not had an opportunity to read the report, I'll be very happy to convey one to his office tomorrow so that he might be able to review it over the weekend and come back Monday with a little more knowledge in this particular area.
Thank you. Member for Stettler, followed by Edmonton Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the honourable leader of the Liberal Party didn't ask some more specific questions about the Carbondale proposal from Norsen Energy. My question to the minister is, has that application been approved?
No, Mr. Speaker. An application was forwarded to my desk, I believe, in the summer of 1986. It remains on my desk unapproved.
Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you. For the Minister of Agriculture, who probably understands the concerns of the beekeeper whose business borders the proposed site and the many other market gardeners in the area, I would ask him, in view of the plant proponent's promise of 6-hour flares during upsets, ask him to explain why this government has no policy of protection of prime agricultural land from proposed developments that could be located just as easily at industrial subdivisions a mere 3 or 4 miles away.
Mr. Speaker, we've got a number of areas that relate directly to the preservation of agricultural land. We work very closely with the municipalities concerned. Plus, I do have full faith in the concern that the Minister of Environment consistently indicates in this House as it deals with environmental concerns.
Member for Little Bow, followed by Olds Didsbury, Edmonton Beverly, Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier and...
There's... No, the government member had been gone. Sorry. Little Bow.
And it relates to page 17 relative to the rural population decline, which has already been raised somewhat in the House, but I'd like to look at it in a different perspective. We note in Alberta that some very significant things that have happened in rural Alberta, such as school populations in counties and municipalities have decreased in the last 10 years some 30%, having a very significant effect. We've noted also more farmers with off-farm employment to try and subsidize their farm incomes, which is a positive step in one sense, and other trends. My question to the Premier is, as I look at government, I note certain programs are attempting to meet this need of the declining population and deal with it. Well, my question to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, is there a comprehensive attack on the problem? Is there a government cabinet task force that deals specifically with that problem? Or would the Premier be considering a white paper on that specific problem so that the government can focus its attention on such an urgent matter?
Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet Committee on Agriculture and Rural Economy deals with this matter actively virtually every week. And it is the government's desire to strengthen the entire agricultural community and also to assist in the rural economy, our towns and our communities throughout Alberta, rural communities. And we have programs, of course, our whole program of decentralization, providing opportunities throughout the province, outside of the major population centers, and also, Mr. Speaker, in our assistance to school boards in a variety of ways, school boards that need extra help, communities that need extra help, tourism assistance, special grants for areas that need extra help. This is an ongoing matter with our government on a daily and weekly basis.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Premier, could the Premier indicate whether the guideline is if there's some comprehensive long-term planning group within Cabinet that looks at the objectives in that perspective? I can understand the day-to-day viewpoint, but is the Premier given direction to his Cabinet, and I believe beyond the agricultural and rural portfolios, as to focus on this problem on a longer-term basis?
Well, Mr. Speaker, these Cabinet committees are both, they must deal at times with short-term problems, but they are also long-term planning committees. The Economic Planning Committee of Cabinet, the Agricultural and Rural Economy Committee of Cabinet deal with this matter on a long-term basis, and of course Cabinet themselves deal with it.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question then to the Minister of Agriculture in line with these questions. In terms of some of the young farmers that may not be able to lease back some of their land this week or next week, could the Minister indicate whether any progress has been made with regards to that policy and that we can maybe slow down the loss of young farmers by implementing a leaseback program or other program fairly soon?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I missed what program the honourable member was referring to.
Mr. Speaker, during the past week or so, I've been raising the matter of young farmers that are going to lose their land this week by quitclaims or foreclosures, and the possibility of a leaseback program being put in place so that those young farmers that have certain capabilities may stay on the land.
That concludes, honourable member. Thank you.
Yes, and we are working on that, as we have indicated to the honourable member in the past, and the Associate Minister has that under active consideration. I should indicate, if I could underscore a comment that the Premier made to the honourable member, whereby, as it relates to our rural communities, we have tripled the funding under this year's budget also for our processing agreement, whereby we are contributing additional funding to value-added processing throughout the province, which will help all of the rural economy in general.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education. Could the Minister of Education indicate what kind of programs or a policy paper could be presented to this legislature that will deal with this continuous decline of school population in rural Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, the difficulty in dealing with the issue in as broad-based a way as the member has defined is that some urban area or some of the rural school board areas are in fact growing in their population, others are declining. I would refer him to the policy paper which was put before Albertans with respect to the equity in education financing issue. As he knows, the New School Act recognizes the principle of equity, in other words, the equitable opportunity for Albertans to an education. And certainly when we get into the debate on the School Act, I think we could have a very good discussion about the issue.
Bakerville.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister of Agriculture, these statistics are alarming. Declining to 14% of the total population by the year 2000. Is the minister satisfied that his government's response is adequate in the face of these kind of statistics, that half of Alberta's farmers will be wiped out in 12 years?
It doesn't say that.
Mr. Speaker, the document does not indicate it the way the honourable member has worded it, but I want to leave the honourable member with the assurance, as has been done in this House on many occasions, even though we are contributing in a very substantial way to the support of our agricultural sector, recognizing the prime importance that it does play in our Alberta way of life. We recognize also that there are financial difficulties, and that is why we have been so reactive and so supportive and are going to continue to be so. And we are, as I indicated earlier, also examining additional programs that hopefully will be more supportive of the agricultural sector sometime in the future. But let me leave the honourable member with the assurance we're not satisfied, even though we are making success and are proving that with the correct support, the farming sector can prove to be economically stable. And we are going to continue with that strong support, recognizing the importance that it plays to everybody's way of life in this province.
Calgary-Buffalo supplementary.
To the Minister of Education, I wonder whether the Minister can tell us what specific programs her department has to help rural areas avoid the closure of schools, an event which can imperil the existence of whole communities.
Mr. Speaker, the manner in which education is funded in this province addresses the needs of all students in Alberta, not just those in rural areas or urban areas, but all of them. And the issue, unquestionably, of school closure causes as much consternation within an urban community as it does within a rural community. And I am pleased that to date there has been a minimal number of school closures in our province, and certainly I hope that will continue to be the way.
Old Stidsbury, followed by Edmonton Beverley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. Recently, Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Wheat Board's Quota Review Committee concluded the review of the grain quota delivery system. They made a number of recommendations, including a production-based quota system that would function through the use of supply agreements. I wonder if the Minister could indicate whether or not he's in a position yet to indicate the government's views with respect to the recommendations of that committee.
Mr. Speaker, we appreciate very much the opportunity to have input into that review process. As the honourable member is aware, it's out there for discussion purposes. We do have some what we consider very legitimate concerns as it relates to the suggested policy that is being advocated, because it appears to favour a little too much the major grain companies and the Canadian Wheat Board and not enough on the side of the farming population.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Then can the Minister indicate just what impact he would see this new supply agreements making on the grain industry?
It is our hope that there will create a greater certainty amongst the farming population as it relates to the actual delivery of their grains. Under the proposed quota delivery system, it offers those guarantees again to the Canadian Wheat Board, but not to the farmer, whereby he is held to the agreement and he will have to ship the grain, but there is no compulsory agreement on the side of the Canadian Wheat Board also, whereby they would have to take the grain in the event that the farmer wanted to deliver it, and that is our major concern.
Then final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, could the Minister indicate if he has contacted the federal government with those concerns?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I don't recall the exact date, but it was some time ago that I wrote to the Minister responsible, the Honourable Charlie Mayer, and just as late as yesterday we had a conversation on that and some other topics.
Edmonton Beverley, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar, then Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions this afternoon are to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the aftermath of last July's tornado has brought to light a number of deficiencies in the insurance and the construction industries. which have frustrated the attempts of many of my constituents to get on with rebuilding of their lives. I know that the Minister's department, if not the Minister personally, have been contacted by the tornado victims about the problems they have encountered with the insurers and the contractors. My question then is, what plan of action has the Minister prepared to address these concerns?
Mr. Speaker, the number of claims that occurred out of the tornado were astounding, because there were claims that people were putting in for water damage to their cars, let alone their homes, and those that were right in the path of the tornado. I know that my department, through the regional office here in Edmonton, had people available at the immediately following the disaster. On a daily basis, they were working with the residents and others who had been suffering from the damage. Then, as time went on and it was a question of processing the claim, the department worked not only with those who had suffered damage, but also with the adjusters and insurance companies at great length. Individual cases are still occurring, and the department is still helping them on an individual basis as is appropriate.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, given that some tornado victims have complained to the Minister's department that they have been unfairly treated by both the insurance companies and the adjusters, will the Minister give these claims her personal attention and a warranted request on behalf of the victims to the Superintendent of Insurance launch an investigation under Section 533 of the Insurance Act?
Well, Mr. Speaker, needless to say, I don't know which specific cases the honourable member is referring to. I do know that the Superintendent of Insurance has been monitoring things between claimant and the insurance company and the adjusters, and I'm certain that the Superintendent would not allow any unfair practices or procedures to prevail. In any event, I would invite the honourable minister, if he does have specific cases of any victims at all, please to bring them to my office, and we will do everything we can to help.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister's department has received complaints from people who feel they have been misled by those they employ to repair their homes, has the Minister directed that these companies' complaints be forwarded to the Director of Trade Practices for investigation?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I don't know the cases to which the honourable member refers, and I would again invite him to bring them to my office. In the meantime, the department has been working with all of the victims, very heavily involved, far beyond the call of duty. They have been working not only during office hours, but also evenings and weekends when required. And I would expect all of the remedies and avenues of appeal to have been fully opened to anyone who suffered from the disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final question is to the Premier. Some of these people in the trailer park stand to lose their homes a second time because they can't get mobile home insurance. It's a case where people need help for personal emergencies. And will the Premier help? Will he order an investigation of this problem and consider the establishment of a government program to insure mobile home owners?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for raising an issue that his constituents raised with him as a problem. I'll discuss it with our Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs and perhaps be able to respond to the honourable member.
Edmonton Gold Bar, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Are there circumstances in place? Is the office going to be continued to operate, the emergency office, so that people with problems arising subsequently that may not yet have been visible, either with reconstruction or psychological problems, can find the assistance they need?
Mr. Speaker, the Minister responsible for disaster services may wish to supplement my answer. I can say this. As far as the Department of Consumer and Corporate Affairs is concerned, the people we have on staff have been reaching out to the victims, as I said earlier, far beyond the call of duty, and I know that they would wish to continue their services to that degree.
Briefly.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps just a brief supplement to that, but there is an ongoing process in response to disaster assistance and disaster-related activities, and Alberta Public Safety Services is the only separate department of a government that exists in Canada solely for that kind of a situation.
Edmonton Gold Bar, main question, followed by Lloydminster, Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many, I read this document yesterday titled Caring and Responsibility. It's a carefully worded document to cover the world and all its contents, but it says very little. Mr. Speaker, the title itself is interesting. The government, it appears, is caring. Communities and individuals are going to have to be responsible. And there's an implication here that we aren't already responsible for our actions. I see it as a self-serving document full of contradictions. One wonders, in fact, where it's leading and what it does portend. My questions are to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps the Premier would tell us what is the real objective of this paper, this exercise, this caper. Why did the government feel it was necessary to write this?
Which question do you want? Which speech do you want?
Mr. Speaker, it's obviously the honourable member hasn't been listening in the question period today. We've already talked about some of the reasons for the document. Talked about, Mr. Speaker, that it is a statement of the government's position on social policy for Alberta. It's a statement of the government's belief in individual initiative, self-reliance, caring for people, love of our homes, love of our communities, the strength of families, that the real strength of this province is the people of this province. It's interesting, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable members want to make fun of an issue which is the social policy for the people of Alberta. The honourable member asks a question. The opposition don't like to hear the answer, and so they make a noise to try and drown it out. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that this party, who their friends in Ottawa have made the House of Commons a joke with the noise and the way they've disrupted it, and now they come here and try to do the same thing in our legislature. I would expect, Mr. Speaker, that the school children...
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Thank you, Honourable members. Until there's silence, maybe it's time to count light bulbs in the ceiling. Mr. Premier.
I think it'd be interesting to school children and guests who come, who watch that kind of action by the opposition. And Mr. Speaker, as I said, this document will be used for planning future social programs of the government. It will also be used to measure existing ones. There is a resolution, as I said, on the order paper. As a matter of fact, with that resolution on there, I would expect that the honourable member would be able then to raise her points at that time. We'd like to hear them, and also, of course, in the estimates of the minister and other ministers. There's so many ministers who have responsibilities that are touched on by this document.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Has there then been specific direction to the Premier given to departments to review particular legislation and programs to conform with whatever it is this document's saying?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, will this paper then be followed by a major policy paper noting the changes in programs, or will each department going to slide in changes with this as justification? That's two.
Mr. Speaker, this is a statement of social policy.
Aha. Mr.
You got him. You got him.
Mr. Speaker, will then part of the government's direction, since we're concerned here about creating an environment for family life, will their direction be to raise the minimum wage immediately so that families can survive above the poverty line?
Mr. Speaker, that I remember my mother used to say that. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, would the honourable member repeat her question?
Question to the Minister of Energy. As we all know, oil drilling activity has been at its highest this year. Recent well counts show a decline in the number of rigs drilling due to the spring breakup. Could the Minister indicate, in terms of activity indicators, what the outlook is for drilling in the province in 1988?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've been anxiously waiting ever since the spring session started for a question about energy, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to get one today. And I hope that some of my comments would inspire some of the members in the opposition to get up this evening in estimates and raise some points. However, we are very happy with the indicators of economic activity in the energy sector so far this year. One stat that I want to throw out, Mr. Speaker, which is very significant, is the fact that the number of well licenses issued in the first quarter of this year was the highest ever in the history of this province. And that's reflective Mr. Speaker, of the intention and the plans of industry to get out there and drill their oil and gas wells. In terms of investment, there's a significant increase in investment in exploration and activity planned on the part of the companies for this year. Number of surveys have indicated that companies are prepared to invest up to a 38% increase over last year, with the overall average expected to be about 20% increase in that investment. So we're looking forward to a good year in terms of conventional oil and gas drilling.
Supplementary to the Minister, could you indicate how many wells were spudded following the granting of the licenses?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of ways to measure the activity in the energy sector, and of course, the number of wells being spudded is one of them. In terms of the first quarter of this year, number of wells spudded are up over 110% from the first quarter of last year. But another very important indicator, of course, Mr. Speaker, is the land sale bonuses. And last year, 1987-88, we had in this province a total of some $760 million paid by oil companies in terms of land sales. And that, Mr. Speaker, was up 216% over the previous year and was the second highest recorded ever in the history of the province.
Might we have unanimous consent of the House to continue this, to complete this series of questions, and also for the Minister of Education and the Solicitor General to supplement information to previous question? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Lloyd-Minster, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister indicate what the price of oil has been in the last 2 or 3 days, or as of this week?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's certainly better than it had been in the first few months of this year, and we are pleased that the oil prices have risen in the last couple of days to around the $18 a barrel level. And of course, for the budget of this year, we have been forecasting $18.50 or $18.60 U.S. as a price that we would plan our budget on. And I think in view of the expectations of analysts and of the industry, that's a very realistic number to look at for the rest of this year.
Supplementary, Lloyd-Minster. Calgary Forest Lawn, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
I wonder if the minister would be prepared to tell the House, Mr. Speaker, how much this increased drilling activity has cost the treasury of this province through grants and loans.
Budget. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member certainly can address this issue this evening. However, Mr. Speaker, we as a province took the initiative in 1986 to make sure that our oil and gas industry came back. And therefore, we announced a $1 billion program that we were happy to announce at that time to lower royalty rates, royalty-free holiday that got many people back into the field working.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister of Energy, in view of his enthusiastic report of how many wells they'll be drilling, would the Minister tell the House whether or not he has any long-term policy as to sharing the pipeline and market capacities in this province between the synthetic oil sector and the conventional oil sector? How is he going to share that for pipelines?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in terms of pipeline capacity, the honourable member will probably recall that last year there was a significant increase in the capacity of the interprovincial pipeline, some 54,000 barrels per day, and that capacity has been taken up. In fact, in taking up that capacity, we were able to avoid a well shut-in situation for a while. But now, with the Suncor plant coming back after the fire, we are seeing the capacity of those pipelines up to a maximum. And in terms of the future, I think one of the answers lies in the ability or lie in the fact that if we can get upgrading to occur in this province, avoid shipping that heavy bitumen in the pipelines where you have to mix it with diluent, we would be able to free up excess capacity for light synthetic crude. And that is one aspect that we are actively pursuing, and it's the policy of this government to see that upgrading occurs here in Alberta rather than at the other end of the pipeline.
Minister of Education, supplementary information. Chair assumes in reply to the member for Little Bow.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I had a momentary lapse in my thinking when I responded to the question from the member, or the leader of the representative party, but it was only momentary. With respect to the concern that government has about the threat of rural school closures, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the distance learning project, which was part of my budget last year and continues to be part this year, over and above the 2% increase of grants that we gave to school boards, which will ensure that we're using technology to expand the opportunities of all students, including those in the rural areas. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me supplement.
Member for Little Bow now. Solicitor General, with regard to question is raised by Edmonton Strathcona, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On April the 12th, member for Strathcona asked about the designated driver program instituted by the City of Edmonton Police. I now have the information that it was a program undertaken in Old Strathcona in November of 1987. It was not evaluated by the police, but they have received positive comments from it and are working with the Alberta and Edmonton Hotel Association and the Alberta Restaurant and Food Association to make it citywide if there's enough interest.
Edmonton Strathcona.
Would the Solicitor General care to follow that up to adopt it more widely if it turns out to be successful?
Mr. Speaker, we'd be pleased to follow it up. In fact, I think it's indicative of a voluntary personal commitment by the licensees and the police, and if it is worthy, it might be worthy of expanding beyond Edmonton.
Thank you.
Point of order, if I may.
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, all members of the Assembly are well aware of the tremendous responsibilities that you carry, sir, for the order of the Assembly, and I have noted with regret that the honourable member for Edmonton Highlands has reflected upon the neutrality and impartiality of your position, and I would ask the honourable member for Edmonton Highlands if she might address that matter further in the normal rules and procedures of the Assembly.
Edmonton Highlands.
Mr. Speaker, as he hasn't made that the implications of his comments clear, I'll take it under advisement.
Chair assumes that there will be communication. The matter will be dealt with tomorrow. Thank you. Orders of the